Hi, I'm Phil Grant, and today I want to show you how using PowerShell to create advanced functions, you can create what I call remote payload wrappers. If you have a bunch of systems that you need to manage, whether it's Windows or Linux, in my experience of tool making for vulnerability remediation, systems management, any kind of information that we need to get from the systems that we manage, this has come in really handy because I can drop in functions that I want to be running on those systems to collect the information, to perform those actions that we may need to remediate vulnerabilities or update configurations, or even send files across SSH to Linux systems specifically. So today I wanted to go over and show with the world. Some of the things that I've come up with that's effective tools to help me do my job. I know you guys are sysadmins, security professionals in the world, and we currently are always working to automate things. And my goal here is to show you something that I worked on that just works for me. So without further ado, we'll dive right in. This is my Linux payload wrapper, and typically, I want all my systems, especially my management machine, to have Windows Management Framework 5.1. Or if you're on Windows 10 or Server 2016, doesn't matter. It's really nice because you get all those commandlets. So anyway, this is built off of that, and there's a really nice module that I want to discuss today called Posh-ssh. And what this allows you to do is allows you to extend your PowerShell usage to connect over SSH connections, stream sessions to Linux machines. This works with Debian, Red Hat, CentOS, even Raspberry Pi, Raspbian OS. I use this quite a bit for multiple systems. So, and even, let's see, Zen Server for Citrix, and then I've used it for Dell iDRAC, updating firmware for that. So, if you're connecting to all these systems and you need to create, a nice unified function to do all these things to help alleviate your vulnerabilities or set configurations or even do firmware updates, this is kind of the wrapper that we use. So anyway, our first couple lines is basically a nice little template for um, what kind of function that you want to run, any kind of platforms, payloads that you want to write for this, and then the tool name. The tool name is always nice because it helps you reference what it is. I always prefix mine with Linux or Windows, depending on what system I write it for. I do all my writing in VS Code, and so let's see, as we move in, we're going to look at the main function. So we've got our parameter declaration here. We have commandlet binding, meaning we can use verbose and all these other nice little added in parameters that help us create advanced functions. Then we have a parameter statement for the computer name string, and we have a nice little help message. Value from pipeline is true, meaning we can pipeline to it. We've got system management automation credential, meaning credential. We're basically going to create a get credential and pass those credentials to the automation PS credential system object, and that will be passed through your authentication when you go and create a session. Then we have a string of log names. So if you want verbosity output to a log, we can do that. Next, we have our begin. We have a process block, and then we have a for each. So we have a for each loop so that we can do this on multiple systems if need be. So basically it reads for each system in computer name, and that computer name can be a string, it can be a get content, it can be an array fed into the fed into the function. So we've got next is a logging block. So we want to set our logging paths. We want to basically have multiple ways to check how our tools are working. So we have connection errors, we have copy errors if we're sending anything over the wire, we have SSH errors. Basically, if there's a failure with the SSH module, it will log for you. We have restart errors. If you need to throw in a restart for a system upgrade or firmware upgrade, if there's a restart based on your error handling, or you try catch blocks or anything like that, this will be logged here. And then anything that's failed will show up in there as well for your error handling, try catch blocks, success as well. And then asset data. Asset data is nice because we're going to be collecting information about what we connect to. So that way we have nice little reports when we finish things. So that's part of this. Next, we do a ping test. And this is something that I know you can use test connection. Test connection is nice for connecting to WMI machines, but in my experience, just creating a network ping .NET class ping object, we can actually read and do a little bit more error handling based on the reply for a Linux machine. So we start with a new object here. We're going to assign it to the ping variable. We have ping.send, which is our system. Our system's being passed through. System's just going to be the host name equivalent to the computer name. So this is nice. When we get system, we can also get system IP is the result once it sees that it's connected. We can pull that information, IP address to string. We have a little bit of error handling here. We have an if block, so that basically if we get success, if we're running verbose, we can get a nice task succeeded. Basically, we know how our script's functioning, what's happened as far as checkpoints. This is something I like to use a lot for testing, and very good verbose output for generating reports if needed. So finally, we get an else block that basically says, okay, this has failed a connection. We want to basically take the system name and then we want to outfile to our connect error logs. So that way we know, hey, it failed to connect. Then it stops. Basically says, okay, we're going to try to see if we get an SSH connection, see if we can do a remote session to Linux. SSH equals new SSH section, and this is after the tool has run at the bottom and imported in the module Posh-ssh. So this is new SSH session. It's very similar to new PS session. Very nice for remoting. It supports computer name parameter, which where system shows up. Our credential is our cred object passed, which is what we use with get credential. We have accept key, which is nice. We can accept the host name, the host key once connecting. We have a nice little verbose connection success message. We have a catch block that basically says, okay, once again, we're going to capture the error and we're going to log that to another connection error. So then we have Linux commands on SSH. So basically, once we have a good successful connection and it sees that SSH is active and true, then we have another try catch block here that will go and grab the system information from cat/etc/system-release. Basically, we're going to invoke an SSH command, which is very similar to invoke command for PowerShell remoting. Using SSH session, we even get that. Props to the creator of Posh-ssh. He built this just like PowerShell remoting. So if you're very familiar with that, this is very nice. We send our command. So we want system info is what we just stored this variable as. And we want to capture the output of this whole command. What does this return? It sends to release. Then we want to gather a properties hash table. So we're going to get a hash table here that basically says we want a DNS name, an IP address, the status, and then the OS that this is picking up. So all of this stuff is going to be built into a hash table. We've assigned our variables as values. So remember, we have a curly brace and an at sign to define our hash table. Then what we're going to do is build a new PS custom object, and we're going to assign all of this hash table as properties to this object. We're going to store it as object. Okay, and so that way when we call this object, we can look directly at those properties. And so remember, this is for each. So you have a nice little for each loop, so you'll have all of this stuff being written as output on this object. So for each system that you connect, you'll have this nice little information, whether you were able to successfully connect to it or not, for troubleshooting further down the line. Then we have our catch blocks. We were unable to get the Linux OS info on the system. We logged the error, and then we say, okay, we have an SSH error out to those logs. Then we have a space here for our remote payload. Any kind of commands that we want to run, any functions that we've built to do this kind of stuff, will go in here. And then we have any kind of execution for those functions that we build. We would call the function here. This would basically be a sub-function call within. So it allows you to dump in your payload, set the call, and then we have an output wrapper block that we can create yet another object to pull that information out. Anything else we want, we can have object 2. We can throw that in here and do a write output object 2. That can go right there. Then we have a cleanup block. Anything we have to do as far as removing any files, any reports left on the system, we can send a stream here and add that as well. Then what we can do, it will move into, okay, here's our in block of if the session is active. If the session's not active and we can't even connect to it, then it basically says the SSH session is null, we're exiting the loop, returning back. Then it's the end of the process block. So we've clearly defined the end of our for each loops and process block, then the end of our function. So calling into the function, this is basically our main function. We can throw in all the variables, things like that. Rolling into the function, we've got our import module for SSH connections. It's going to be find module, Posh-ssh, pipe 2, install module if you don't have it. Then we're going to go ahead and import module to Posh-ssh. Then we're going to be doing an admin credential token creation. So this is where I was describing earlier. We're creating a system management automation PS credential.net object. And then we're in the subset of that, we're doing a get credential. We're throwing a nice little message in there. Input admin credentials to run this tool. So that's all captured and evaluated first and then stored in cred, which gives us our credential object to pass into our function. Then we have a systems target list, which can either be text or CSV. Basically, we have systems and we say we want a get content from either the text or a CSV. Read line by line and feed it into the for each systems loop. Then we're going to set our tool name variable for logging support. Basically, this is going to get passed down here under log name variable that gets passed into the function so that as you're building more tools, each tool name gets logged its own set of log instances. They're all named the same. So that way it's a lot easier for you if you're having to go look through your logs folder, logs directory, and see what happened with the tool, if it had any output. Next, we have our main execution of the Linux payload wrapper. We're going to do a for each system in systems to get our get content. System is going to be passed as the computer name parameter, and then we've got our credential parameter using our stored credential object. We've got our log name, which is our tool name, what we're going to call it. We have verbose output because we like to see what's going on. and error action stop. Anything breaks, we want to make sure we just stop it. Next we have get SSH session, which is going to grab all of the session objects once we exit the loop and the function exits. We're going to pipe to remove SSH session, which works very similarly to get PS session and remove PS session, which is very nice to clear all the connections, make sure everything is locked up. So what I'll do now is look into some of the payloads that I've been building. So this would be an example as well of basically a tool wrapper that I used for managing data centers. It goes through and sets up new SSH connections, and then basically by using the invoke SSH command, we're sending all these commands out. So first we have our system info output. We have some things stored as perms, so we're going to do, we basically declared that up here. So here's the command variables that we were doing to send across. We have perms2 as chmod 666. We want to make sure that this was sending over new certificates that were generated to update Zen server. We can set our different permission sets, lock it down further. We've got, if we want to do an SSL restart, we can do that. We've cat system release is our system info. We can do some renames here of our certificates, and then basically we set remote path. So down here, this is basically going to be like our payload section. So as you start building these commands, storing them as variables, you can very quickly throw in your functions and have all these over the SSH session. So we can even send files over SCP, Secure Copy Protocol, and this will be all over port 22 by default. We have nice computer name variables, so we can send that. We don't have a session variable or session parameter, I don't think, for that commandlet, but it works really nice just the same. We set our local path saying where on the system do we have a config built, say for DevOps, or you've just built a config that you want to throw across, or a new file that you need to send. Remote path is that variable that we saw earlier, and then a credential object to do the send. Then we have some rename and permissions and things like that. Then I built in, this is where that restart is. For each different release of Zen server, there's different restart commands. So I basically had a nice if or else of what the release is, send the right command, and then basically say, hey, it's been successful or it wasn't, and log it. So basically, that's how I've been using this tool wrapper for connecting to Linux systems, and really all it is just an automation PowerShell remoting session. And so being able to build a nice little function or tool like this comes in very handy if you have to do repetitive things or deploy a lot of things or collect information. Very helps me quite a bit in my job, so I build stuff like this all the time. Hope you enjoyed the video. Like below. If you're interested in more kinds of tools like this, I do vulnerability remediation all the time. Every job I do, I'm a contractor. I'm certified in all kinds of different things. I just got my MCSE in cloud platform. And infrastructure, I've got an MCSA in Server 2016, MCSA in Windows Server 2008. And I know this is a little weird for having a Linux video coming from a Windows guy, but having the experience that I've touched with Red Hat 7, Debian, CentOS, in enterprise environments, this is this kind of stuff that I'm dealing with, is remediating vulnerabilities, doing firmware upgrades, just trying to automate all of it. So if you share passion for automation like I do, stay tuned because I've got a whole bunch of more stuff to show you guys. I'm going to try to get some more videos up later, but enjoy, and I hope this was of some great information to you guys out there. I'm trying to build a nice fan base. There's a lot of information about PowerShell out there, but you're only limited by the mind and your creativity of how you want to use it. It is a very versatile language. I utilize it for multiple things in multiple environments, and it's so flexible. Thank you, Jeffrey Snover, for your work on this. It's amazing because the community has picked up and built stuff like Posh-ssh. Anyway, I'm very excited and motivated to be able to share this with you guys. Hope you enjoy, and with that, um, I'll stop right now. Have a great day and continue to be secure.